Well, it wasn't the business-like road trip we all imagined it would be, but down their starting quarterback in the second half this afternoon, the Sooners survived, they advanced, they are 9-2, and still fighting for a berth in the Big 12 championship game. 31-24, the final in Provo today. Oklahoma gets past a pesky and very resilient BYU team. Parker Thune, Brandon Drum, Brian Clinton on the headset, coach that he is. And on the far end, there is Jesse Crittenden. We are here with you on the OU Insider Under the Visor postgame podcast to break it all down. And fellas, I think there's one very natural place to start here. Last week, the Sooners elected to roll with Davis Beville towards the end of the West Virginia game rather than Jackson Arnold. Brent Venables and Jeff Lebby reaffirmed that if they needed to go win a football game, Arnold was going to be the guy that they turned to, but they wanted to preserve his red shirt if possible. Well, that became impossible circa halftime today as Gabriel took a hit to the head late in the second quarter. And when they reemerged from the locker room to start the second half, Gabriel was not with the Sooners, did not warm up, and it was the Jackson Arnold show. Now, it wasn't a stellar performance offensively for Oklahoma down the stretch, but they were able to get it done at the direction of a true freshman quarterback. And Arnold might not have stolen the spotlight, guys, but Jesse, I guess I'll start with you. For what Arnold did, especially as a true freshman coming into a hostile road environment today, definitely says a lot about what the future of this program is with him at the helm.
Yeah, look, it was an impossible situation to put a true freshman quarterback in. I mean, not only in a must-win game with, you know, it's a close game in an environment that I think, you know, a BYU environment, that crowd was loud today, y'all. It was loud. It was ferocious. It was hostile. That's a tough spot to put a quarterback in, a true freshman quarterback that hasn't played meaningful reps in weeks. And it wasn't perfect. He came in, he seemed a little rattled those first couple of possessions. I actually think that in a lot of ways makes it more admirable. He eventually settled in. And on that last possession, the first play of that possession was a deep pass to Nick Anderson that narrowly missed. But you like that he was aggressive. You like that he went down the field. And a lot of people are going to talk about the Jalil Farouk play, and I know we'll talk about that more, and rightfully so. But to me, it was what he was able to do on the ground. I mean, he had a 5-yard gain before that, a 6-yard gain on the ground before that, and he made plays. He made enough plays for OU to win. And I think in a lot of ways, you put a lot of true freshman quarterback in that situation, OU doesn't win today. And I think he did enough to stabilize things and help get the win.
Yeah, you looked at me, so I'll go real quick. I talked to Jeff Lebby and talked to Jackson Arnold, and I thought the interesting thing is they both talked about him understanding his checks and understanding, you know, when cover zero came up, he knew exactly what to check into. And on one of the most crucial pivot moments of the game, 3rd and 7, they needed to get the first down. You could tell he saw the box was loaded. He saw that they were in cover zero, and he checked into the right play. He had I guess he had 3 or 4 plays that he could check into at that point. He called the right play, checked into it, rolled out, waited, and was patient. And that's something you have to give him credit for, because a lot of freshmen, they're going to try to force it early and fast the second the pressure starts to get to him. He waited. He was, I guess, what you call off platform in the quarterback world, and waited for Farouk to come across and made that throw. It was across his body. It was across the field, over the middle, hash to hash. And Farouk made a great catch. Arnold made a great throw. And that moment, I think, encapsulates everything with Jackson Arnold. He thought he was going to redshirt, like you brought up. Thought he was going to redshirt. Most kids in his situation, they aren't. Even they're not going to be as ready as he was, right? There's not a lot of, you know, oh, I might get to play here or there. Last week, it was like definitive. He's redshirting. But he stayed the course, stayed in the playbook, stayed within everything, understood the assignment, understand the check with me's, all that type of stuff. And it ended up winning OU the ball game at the end of the day. So you've got to give credit where credit's due. And I know fans are going to be that I don't think this is enough to cause the tension that some want to make, because there's a lot of people that want Arnold, right? and they're big on. You see it in our mentions all the time. DG makes the slightest mistake, and it's throw Jackson, and he won't do it. Well, he overthrew the ball, right? So everybody makes mistakes. The kid made a mistake. He said he wanted to have that one back, but overall, Jackson played really, really well. He ran the ball well, and he played within himself. And that to me is the biggest thing with a true freshman coming in such a huge moment.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to take away from, and you guys both hit on this, the poise that he showed down the stretch is really what was promising. It's a tough situation to be put in, regardless being a backup quarterback. When the starter goes out, a lot of times you really have to change how you're doing things offensively. And I felt that it at least seemed that Jackson Arnold was well prepared enough that Oklahoma was still able to do what it needed to offensively. The biggest thing was the fact that he fumbled the second snap that hit him in the hands. To bounce back from that in the environment that he bounced back in was really, really good. That's something that I think that you can look to as maybe a stepping stone for him in growth going forward, because there's going to be a lot of really hostile environments that he's going to have to deal with in the future. You don't look no further than a game in Baton Rouge coming up next year. So, this is certainly something that you need to build off of if you're Jackson Arnold. And I think that given what he did and was able to secure the win there in the end, that's a huge thing for a guy that's, he hasn't played much football at all at this level. So it's really promising.
Real quickly, anybody that watched the game saw you guys were on the field. I want to talk to you two on the field. I had it pulled up on YouTube TV here on my laptop during the game just so I could see the replays when they took place. The cameras were shaking.
There was a lot of
times.
noise.
Yeah.
A lot of noise at field level. The BYU crowd brought it today.
Absolutely. There was something that seemed to happen every third down. I guess it was just them stomping their feet or whatever. But that's a concrete stadium. It's not like these are metal bleachers. And there was a distinct rumbling sound, and it was cool. It was really, really cool. The venue was second to none.
Gavin Sawchuk had an outstanding day, over 100 yards on the ground for the third consecutive game. Danny Stutzman was awesome once again. Billy Bowman made what stands as probably one of the most memorable and pivotal plays of the year. And that's only scratching the surface. There was plenty of good today for Oklahoma, but there was also a lot of bad. This was a game that Oklahoma was favored to win by 24.5 points. BYU was in it all the way up until the final gun. So there is plenty of good. There is also plenty of bad to break down from this game. And we're going to do all of it in just a second after a quick word from our sponsor.
This episode of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast is brought to you in part by Manscaped. Ready to spice up your Thanksgiving? As we dive headfirst into mountains of mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce, let's talk about the unsung hero of the holiday season, the Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. And guys, like many of you, I struggled for years to find a trimmer that offered adequate comfort and ease of use. But the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra takes the cake. It's waterproof, so you can groom wet or dry. Plus, the LED spotlight ensures you don't miss a spot, even in low-light situations. And for my men who go back for seconds, Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle for the man who deserves it all. This bad boy is the whole plate and dessert. Included is the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, the Weed Whacker 2.0 ear and nose trimmer, Manscaped's liquid formulations, and 2 free gifts. Once you're done shaping up, it's only right you put your pants presents in the best wrapping of all, the Boxers 2.0. These are seriously the best boxers I've ever worn. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code OU Insider at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code OU Insider. Be thankful this holiday season for the best gift of all from Manscaped. Your balls will thank you.
All right, so we talked about Jackson Arnold. Did I scare you there, Brandon?
I didn't know you were coming back.
Oh, Brandon got spooked. It's still Halloween in his head. The Manscaped ad rolled, and he got the tremors. But we talked about Jackson Arnold and how we talked about Jackson Arnold again. Didn't shine by any means, but the plays that he made were exactly the plays that Oklahoma needed to win the football game. He did get a great deal of help from the defense, but he got a ton of help from Jackson Arnold in the running game.
He made a
Or
huge.
Gavin Sawchuk, excuse me.
Yes, Gavin Sawchuk was awesome, but you got to give credit to Jackson Arnold. There was a run for first, I believe it was 2nd and 6. Jesse, can you quote me on that? Where he took on how many dudes?
It was on that last possession. On that last possession, there was a 2nd and 5, and he ran. It was 6 yards for a first down. And that was huge. Shot
after shot, and he just kept driving his feet. It looked like Blake Bell in that situation, number 10 out there running. Obviously, he's a lot smaller, but he ran with the same ferocity that he ran with, and the dudes were just bouncing. And it took 3 dudes to bring him down after he got 6 yards. And I was up there. I was like, get down, get down, get down, because I didn't want him to take a shot to the head. It looked like it was going to happen. But that, to me, again, Jackson Arnold, that was such a huge run. Gavin Sawchuk, on the other hand, that 16-yard run was special.
It was a grown man run.
It was a grown man run. And we had been talking about it. I know other OU fans had too, and other people had too. We talked about it all season long. And we were literally the only ones that were reporting he needed to get in condition and in better shape. And the coaches have come out and said it multiple occasions. Levy reiterated it again today. Needed to get in shape, finally did. But we kept saying once he does, and once he starts to get in a rhythm, he has a chance to be special. Guys, he's a freshman. He is a freshman. Can everybody wrap your heads around that? A freshman. And this dude is running. We asked last week, or I asked last week, is he a top 5 running back in the Big 12? After the day, you have to give him that, right? Like, this is 3 100 yards in a row. And the other one that he didn't run for 100 yards, he had, I think, 70-something or 60-something yards, and he made the biggest play of the game against UCF when they needed it. He's just come up so huge in such critical moments for Oklahoma in the run game.
Think about how inconsistent the running game was for the first 7 weeks of the season. Think about how much of a struggle it was. Think about how much that was holding this offense back. I mean, those days are gone. Gavin Sawchuk has been really, really good the last 3 weeks. I mean, again, he averaged 7.6 yards per carry today. He's been really, really efficient. I thought Tawi Walker did a couple nice things too when he got in the game. You know, I still don't think he's fully healthy compared to where he was early in the season. But yeah, I think, and look, the Javante Barnes, thing, he just hasn't had the impact like I think a lot of us thought he would. But, and you mentioned it, Parker, there was a lot of negative things to dissect today. But I think Gavin Sawchuk, his emergence, his efficiency, his explosiveness, his physicality, those are all things to be excited about, especially within the context of how much this running attack struggled through the first few weeks of the season.
And they did struggle. And you kind of wondered who that alpha was going to be in the backfield. It looked like Tawi Walker for a while, but Tawi Walker has more of a plodding run style, not a guy that's going to be a breakaway home run threat. And to have a guy like Gavin Sawchuk that not only has game-breaking speed, but also displays a ton of physicality in the run game and is also quite seldom brought down on first contact. It truly seems, I think as of today, as though the Sooners have finally kind of found their bell cow in the backfield.
Absolutely. Well, and he became the leading rusher for Oklahoma today, this season. He's got 480 yards on the season. Vast majority of that obviously has come in the last 3 games. And I think this is a guy that when you look at what he's done in the last quarter here of the season, it should be really exciting for Oklahoma fans. I mean, he whenever he hits second gear that he does out there in the second level, he's so hard to stop, and he still has the ability to be nimble and make cuts and move. He looks very fluid running the football. And today was an example of needing him to make. Oklahoma needed that like they didn't just need the touchdown to take the lead, but they needed that to show that they were able to play complementary football on the road, which hadn't happened all season long. And so for Danny Stutzman to get the sack, strip sack there, and then Gavin to cash in on that and give Oklahoma the lead, which ended up being the game winner, that's a really big step for a kid, again, who you just said is a freshman. So this is really good stuff from some of the young guys on the offensive side of the ball.
So let's flip the coin here.
Negative side now.
Well, but
Hashtag defense.
I suppose yes. Let's turn our attention from the offense to the defense, and from the positive to the negative. Well, I guess it's not entirely negative, guys, because I tweeted it out in the fourth quarter. This defense today was somehow the only reason BYU was in the game, and also the only reason OU ended up winning.
Correct.
An enigma. They are an enigma, dude.
It truly was a football paradox, because they were gashed all day at the point of attack on the ground by BYU. The Cougars manhandled that Oklahoma front seven, guys. Manhandled them. But yet, Oklahoma forces 3 turnovers. One of those is a 100-yard pick six by Billy Bowman. And so, like, you want to talk about this textbook, like, dictionary definition of boom or bust. That was the Oklahoma defense today.
21-0 advantage in points off turnovers.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from. But then, like you said, it's that weird dichotomy is because if the defense doesn't make those plays, you probably don't win the game. But also, BYU came into the game today averaging 90 yards rushing per game, dead last in the Big 12. They had 217 today, their most of any game this season. They had 390 total yards, their most in any conference game this season. So, yeah, I think it's a weird thing where there's several moments you can point to where the defense was good. But, I mean, you're right, Parker. And, I mean, even the Billy Bowman interception, that pick six, the 3 plays before that were a 22-yard run, a 21-yard run, and a 15-yard run to get them down to the 2-yard line. The play call from BYU to do a pass right there, I don't know. You're not going to look at that too much if you're an Oklahoma fan, but that's like you want one possession to perfectly encapsulate that. It's BYU manhandling OU down to the 2-yard line and then Billy Bowman getting a pick six.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, that's exactly what it was all day long. And it seemed like when you have a guy like Aiden Robbins, who he was a 1,000-yard rusher at UNLV last year.
Yeah.
So this isn't a guy that's lost on having big games. But for him to have the success that they had running the football today against an Oklahoma defense that, for the most part, has been
good,
very stout against the run.
Mm-hmm.
BYU's offensive line, look, it's not a good unit. It's just not. I mean, they haven't had any success this year running the football, and that is kind of a testament to the Oklahoma defensive line kind of disappearing again a little bit, which is frustrating. And I know that those guys, I know that they don't try to disappear or anything. This is just one of those things that has seemed to happen on the road this year. And I don't know if they're having trouble communicating. I don't know what the issue is with that, but there is certainly something that has hindered them on the road up front, and it showed up again today.
And look, there's fans on Twitter and everybody that wants to say the defensive line's bad.
And that's not what I'm saying whatsoever.
No, you're not saying that. They struggle on the road at times, in pivotal moments. I think that is what you're saying in a more condensed version. And they're better. Everybody wants to act like this is the 2022 version of the OU defensive line, and it's not. And the funny thing is if Jalen Redmond returned this year, can you imagine this defensive line? It's already way better. They're 8th in the nation in tackles for losses. Yes, they had 3 games or 4 games without a sack before today, but they still are. Their pressure rating is out of this world good. They're doing everything that they can in the run game outside of the day. They've been really good in the run too this season. Like this, there was so many things today that was like out of the ordinary. And even Brent Venable said, he goes, it's not like us to play the way we did in the front seven. It made no sense what was going on. And yeah, they figured things out late in the game. They figured things out late. It was kind of weird because late in the first half, they figured things out and started to stop them. Late in the second half, they figured things out, started to stop them. So when you look at that, it was almost like BYU would come in and they would have a good game plan to start the half. The first few drives, ironically, the first 2 drives, you stopped BYU in the second half. And then in between that and the last 3 drives, they were just could do whatever they wanted. And just Epps was just running untouched 90% of the time. And I don't know what to make of it, but for the fans that are like down on the D line, I'm here to tell you, Bates and Chavis, they're way, way better than last year. I want y'all to go watch last year's team and watch this defensive line. Way better. And if they continue on this pace next year with the recruiting, with the transfers, it's going to be so much better, even though you're going to the SEC. Patience. This defense is not as bad as they look at times. They just aren't. They've been really, really good at times this year. And it's shown. The win-loss record shows.
Well, and look no further. I mean, if you want a direct example of the defensive line being better, look no further than how good they've been on the goal line this year.
Boom.
That's I mean, they're
to the fourth, they have to pass the ball.
Exactly.
Teams
so
pass the ball
that
instead.
in and of itself should show you just how much improvement they've made up front. So again,
credit Mike Houck for that, by the way. He's the one that brought that up. He's like, yeah, they pass the ball because they can't run the ball and you on 4th down. So
right.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So
Makes sense.
There's obvious improvement there. You've got to get it figured out in the big situations on the road.
This is the 4th consecutive true road game for Oklahoma where we have seen them struggle. And Tulsa is the only other true road game they've played this year, but all 4 true road games that they have played in conference, we have seen them either start slow or run into some doldrums along the way. And Cincinnati didn't really challenge them. They didn't play their best football that day by any stretch of the imagination, but Cincinnati just didn't have the firepower to challenge them. Obviously, they were on the wrong end of upset losses in Lawrence and in Stillwater. But today, especially going into the 4th quarter, guys, that felt like a game, and maybe it's still the PTSD of 2022 embedded in your head, but going into that 4th quarter, it was like, okay, it really feels like Oklahoma's going to lose this game.
Yeah.
Well, not to mention when Zach Schmidt missed the field goal at the beginning of the 4th quarter. I mean,
yeah, let's go there.
Well,
special teams is a debacle for this program right now.
It's so baffling because in the first half, at the end of the first half, he made a 23-yarder easily chip shot. Again, another chip shot. This time, a 28-yarder, and it felt huge, not only because BYU had been having success offensively. Jackson Arnold's in the game. It's the 4th quarter. It's a tie game. OU needs this field goal to go up by 3 with like 12 minutes left in the game. And that kick just hooked left. I mean, it wasn't really that. It wasn't so bad. Close. And that got BYU's crowd into it. And thankfully that, for OU, the defense was able to kind of pick that up. But holy cow, look, it'd be one thing if it was a 50-yarder. It'd be one thing if it was a 40-yarder, but a 28-yarder where there's where the wind is not enough of an excuse to miss it that bad. That's just, there's no way to excuse that. There's just not.
And being down on the field, I mean, it was dead. There was no wind.
No,
I mean, for the most part, it was there. So he literally, he just shanked it.
Well, the DG's 55-yard throw, it got caught in the wind because it was soaring, and then it just like dropped on that throw to Jaden Gibson early in the game, because we were looking at the flags and they were coming in pretty hard from that score side. And that was the side he kicked to. But when he did kick at that point in the game, the wind was dead.
No.
It when it got cloudy, the wind just died out.
And I would have to fact check this, but off the top of my head, I believe that is the shortest miss by an Oklahoma kicker since Michael Honeycutt shanked it from 19 against Kansas State in 2014. I do not think there's been a shorter miss since then.
Does anybody remember what happened to that team after he missed that? They just crushed.
They fell apart.
They fell apart. They were so good up until that point. Anyway, I digress. Go ahead. That's just such a poor. That's a bad memory, Parker.
I'll be honest. I thought when Zach Schmidt missed that kick, I thought, oh my God, Oklahoma's going to lose this game.
Yep. It's kind of hard not to think that at that point, right? Like, given all that you've been through in the last year and a half, how can you not be thinking that at that moment?
Well, Jesse, I think your exact quote was after he missed it, he goes, "Oh God, this is Kansas."
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't blame you for saying that. I mean,
it was just BYU was absolutely just gushing OU with their running game. And I just thought, okay, well, now BYU's going to get the ball back. They're going to take up 5 minutes of possession because that's what they've been doing the last few possessions. And it's just, the whole time I'm thinking in the second half, not that Jackson Arnold was playing poorly, but I'm thinking, man, the special teams and defense need to do as much as they can to make things easier on Jackson Arnold, and missing that kick just increased the pressure and the defense stepped up. But oh my God, I thought the game was over. I thought it was over.
Now, this is kind of a weird place to go here, but you brought up Dylan Gabriel, and so I want to make sure we get there before we get off on another tangent.
He got hurt.
He played very well until he left the game.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things that, again, I want to make sure we don't gloss over, because it's all too easy to get caught up in
freshman.
Well, Jackson Arnold was great. He did what he needed to do to win the Sooners the football game. But I want to make absolutely certain that what Dylan Gabriel did in the first half of that football game does not go unacknowledged, because he was excellent. He was excellent up until that point.
They don't win the ball game if he doesn't have the first half he had. That's a fact. He was very good. He had a 169.7 QB rating, if I can remember off the top of my head. I think he had 191 yards. He was, was he 21 for?
He was 13 of 21.
21 for 191, 2 touchdowns, and a QB rating of 169.7. Like, that is, if you're looking for a quarterback and how you want them to perform, that's what you want out of them. And everybody that hates on him, it drives me crazy, because we talked about this, Jesse, in the press box. Like, why do fans get so angry with him? And it's because they were so spoiled with Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams. Like, okay, yes, those are tough guys to follow. We get it. But this dude has been nothing but almost exceptional all season long, and he just gets blasted. And and it's not, we're generalizing the fan base. It's a small sector, but there's a very loud sector that finds every fault in what he does, even though he was really, really good. He did miss a couple, I will say, he missed a couple of wide open passes. There was a couple of times when he would slide up in the pocket. There was one where Jaden Gibson was wide open. It could have ran forever. But luckily, the pass they threw, Nick Anderson got called. They called pass interference on that. I don't know if it was really pass interference, but he got bailed out on that situation. But outside of that, and maybe a few like tucking and running a little too early, he was downright exceptional and kept OU in the ball game when the defense was lagging.
Let me interject this real quick. Dylan Gabriel has quite clearly been one of the best quarterbacks in college football this year. I mean, the stats bear that out. The performances bear that out. I did see, look, I understand the fan base's optimism about Jackson Arnold. There should absolutely be a ton of optimism, but there was obviously, with Jackson Arnold playing today, the chances of a red shirt are gone. And I did see some things like, okay, well, the Jackson Arnold era has officially begun today. It has not. It just has not.
So fast.
It has. Look, two things can be true. Jackson Arnold did enough things today. There should be optimism. But if Dylan Gabriel can be back on Friday, Dylan Gabriel is still the starting quarterback for this team. I mean, he just is. The Jackson Arnold era, it's coming. It's not happening right now.
You got the trailer today. This was the trailer.
If it weren't for the emergence of Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State, I think that Dylan Gabriel would be the runaway offensive player of the year in the Big 12. Not even close. Yeah. I don't, and I think on top of that, he is unquestioned going to be QB. He's going to be the quarterback on that All Big 12 list. He's out. He's paced the league in almost every passing category. He's tied with Caleb Williams for most rushing touchdowns with 11 on the year. I mean, he's been incredible. And this mantra that it's time for him to hand over the reins, I think it's ridiculous.
They're not going to put, if Dylan Gabriel can come back, which Brent Venables said that there's optimism, or he made it seem like there's optimism he'll be back on Friday. We'll see.
Backtracked really quick.
He did.
He's really quick.
I'm not 100%. There's just no way to be certain if it's a concussion that he's going to be back on Friday, but against TCU. But
well, and it does make you think, right? If it is a concussion, who was the last player that Oklahoma cleared from the concussion protocol in less than a week? Because generally the standard MO has been, you have a concussion, you're missing a game.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
No.
because Guyton even missed. This is the second game he's missed with concussion protocols. So
But ultimately, whether Dylan Gabriel is able to come back Friday or not, this is still Dylan Gabriel's team, and he has not been perfect. And you're right, Brandon. You mentioned in the press box today, he missed a couple of throws. There are wide receivers he misses from time to time. Literally every quarterback does that.
Yep, it'll happen.
He's not perfect. The frustrations are fine, but you have to acknowledge that this is still his team. He's absolutely been one of the best quarterbacks in college football this year, and he deserves a chance to finish out this year. And there's a discussion about what's going to happen after this, but as far as this year, it's still doing Gabriel's team.
So how telling will it be if he doesn't go out for senior day?
If he doesn't go out for senior day, I mean, heck, at that point he's coming back. I fully expect that he will be out there for senior day.
I do too. I just remember there's been a few players that they knew they were going to come back, so they just didn't do senior day until the following year. There was no use doing it. Just throwing that out there because it went from almost a given that he wasn't going to return, right? To now BV's going, yeah, we haven't even approached that yet. And everybody's going, uh-oh. Like that could be a problem. Now, I think behind the scenes, I think you look at it and you're probably like, they're probably pretty obvious that I just don't think he wants to come out and say it until DG is ready to be the one to put it public, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's his announcement. I think BV would be a guy to respect that anyhow. So that's exactly.
As far as what this game means for Oklahoma going forward, regardless of who is playing quarterback next Friday when they take on TCU at Owen Field, I guess, how do you feel? Like, how do you walk away from this game feeling, guys? Because it's kind of an interesting conglomeration of emotions, right? Because that BYU team, you can say objectively that BYU team should not have been able to hang with OU today. And we said it all week, right? This, on paper, this Oklahoma team is far more talented than BYU. OU is coming in with some momentum, maybe not as much as they would like, but they won 59-20 last week against West Virginia. They've got momentum. West Virginia has none. They'd lost 2 straight games by 30-plus points coming in, and it ends up being a 31-24 contest. Even so, is there solace to be found in the fact that that's a game you probably should have lost, and your guys just found a way to gut it out?
Like I mentioned earlier, I honestly thought Oklahoma was going to lose this game. I did. And
last year's team would have.
I mean, we've said that before, but and it's been true, and I think it's true again today. But look, I think there's absolutely things to be I don't know if discouraged is the right word, but the rushing defense simply wasn't good today. It seemed like it took a step back considering how good and consistent it's been for most of the year. But then you look at the other side of it. OU only committed 2 penalties in the second half for 15 yards. That was better after the first. So there's a lot of things we could go through. But basically, my takeaway is I think both things can be true. It's good to get a win on the road, but it is disappointing that being a 25-point favorite against a team that is probably in the bottom 3 of the Big 12 at minimum, probably. That this was a game that Oklahoma could have legitimately lost. And look, teams struggle. Getting a win on the road in conference play is always big. There's things to be encouraged by, but it is a little disappointing that this game was this close and that BYU had a chance to win. It is a little discouraging.
As bad as BYU has been this year, they've also been fairly good in games that they've won. Like, they've looked good. I think Tech, right? At Arkansas. And at that point in the season, before Arkansas collapsed, that was a good Arkansas team at that point. They went into Fayetteville and just beat them down. So I guess my point is that looks sometimes can be deceiving. They were in an atmosphere. The atmosphere obviously props up things. You're on the road. You're playing in an altitude that you've never played in before. And I think that might be a little bit underplayed a little bit because you looked gassed at times. Like Billy Bowman about pulled up on that 100-yard.
He stalled out at about the 25-yard line.
And that's no problem. In this thin air, he gassed out about 30 yards. And that BYU player, I can't remember which one it was.
Quarterback.
The quarterback was about to catch a 4-3 guy.
Yeah.
And he was not on the field for the next drive either.
No,
He was laughing
gassed.
about it. He was laughing about it in post game. They asked him, "He's like, did you get gas there at the end?" He's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "This air is so thin, I couldn't breathe."
So I mean that okay. So I think a lot of this plays into when you come to places like this. Is what made back in the day. It's what made Colorado so hard to beat. It's what propped up Boise State back in the day. It makes these high altitude teams very difficult if you're not used to it. Is that an excuse? Sure, it's an excuse, but it's not one that you can lean on. If you lose a game, you just played like crap and you deserve to lose. But there were plays and there were instances today you could totally see the altitude affecting some of the things Oklahoma was doing. Particularly, I think in the front seven, they were getting gassed middle of the game. Like they were tired. You could see how tired the D-line was. And then the Billy Bowman play. So I think overall, in my opinion, it just feels like to answer your question about the is there something to worry about? Sure, but as much as there is to worry about after this game, last week there was so much to be proud about and happy about after that win against West Virginia. So you got to kind of find middle ground and not get too high, not get too low. I fully expect after what TCU did to Baylor today, it to open the eyes of Oklahoma, and they'll get back right. Plus, it's senior night. There's going to be a lot of emotions. The crowd's going to be behind it, the final home game of the season. I mean, it's just there's a lot working in Oklahoma's favor going into Friday's game.
How much of a concern is lack of depth at cornerback right now? Because Gentry Williams was on the shelf for a second straight game. Your starters were Woody Washington and Kenai Walker.
You love him.
Love him. Makari Vickers did not travel after getting banged up last week. You had Josiah Wagner and you had Jacoby Johnson. Those were your only other active corners today. You had 4 healthy corners, and Jacoby got banged up and had to go into the medical tent in the second quarter. So is that going to be a vulnerability for OU if Gentry doesn't get right on, or by the time Friday rolls around, they got to do battle with TCU? Because it didn't really hurt them today, but
they did on that 4th down play.
Well, yes, there were times at which, like, you could tell, okay, they're stretched pretty thin at cornerback, and they just don't really have a viable solution opposite Woody Washington, at least not one that you're confident in. You get a team like TCU that can sling the rock a little bit better than BYU. Does it exacerbate and kind of magnify that concern?
I believe so, 100%. There were situations in this game where the intermediate passing game for BYU just they found ways to move the ball that they really hadn't this season, at least from what I had seen on film coming into this game. And a lot of that had to do with the issues that we saw with what you just said. There's guys that are just not in position to make plays. And as unfortunate as that is, it's kind of that next man up mentality. And that's kind of what they're going to have to lean on. I really think this team does need Gentry Williams back because the defense, I know that there's 11 guys out there on the field, but when an offensive coordinator can look down there and know that there's something that they can attack, they're going to attack it. Not to say that, any of those guys filling in for Gentry aren't capable of making plays. That's not what I'm getting at all. I'm just saying whenever Gentry Williams is out there, he's the best corner on that team. Woody Washington is great, but when Gentry Williams has been at his best this season, he's been a difference maker. And I think without him, you're just not as good in the secondary.
Yeah, look, Gentry. I talked to somebody really close to that situation prior to the game, and they essentially said it was up to the training staff. He dressed out. He went through the warmups. He did everything he's supposed to do. I just think they're trying to hold him out for next week. I think that was their mindset. I think if you put to do a Jim Traber type deal, if you put the little truth serum in them and you asked Oklahoma, they went into this game, we're going to sit Guyton, Gentry Williams, let them get another 7 days down the road healthy, and then throw them into a pivotal game against TCU because they probably, true Simeon, thought they were going to walk in here and just be done with it fairly early. They didn't realize they were going to get punched in the face and then retaliation left and right by BYU. So you got to have him. Gentry has got to be back. This defense is so much better when Gentry Williams is in that. All season long, he's been what has kept Oklahoma and allowed. He's made big plays, interceptions. He was at one point leading the team in interceptions. He's that yin to Woody Washington's yang, and ultimately losing him, you have a lot of inexperience and a lot of guys that just don't play sound football. And that's one thing when you look at Gentry Williams, he plays sound football and good, smart football.
One thing, or rather one player that we have not yet talked about who had one whale of a day, and it's become the standard for him, but Danny Stutzman said on Twitter after the game that he hadn't eaten in 2 days because of food poisoning. And Brent Venables mentioned in his post-game press conference he wasn't sure that Danny Stutzman was going to play today. He didn't think he was going to physically be able to. But Stutzman was adamant he was going to go. He went, led the team in tackles with 10. And not only that, he came up with one of the biggest momentum swings of the game with that strip sack in the fourth quarter that handed the ball back to the Sooners. And correct me if I'm wrong, that was immediately following the Schmidt miss, was it not?
It was.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So Danny Stutzman comes up with that strip sack. And at that point, all the momentum had favored BYU. The split second before Stutzman flies in and makes that play. And then immediately all that momentum evaporates. All the energy in the building evaporates. And it was at that point that you figured, okay, well, maybe Oklahoma gets this done after all, because we've watched so many of those same type of games over the last couple of years. But that is one thing that the Sooners, it's almost a common denominator, if you will. That's one thing that the Sooners have never been able to come up with in those types of scenarios, is a play that can turn the tide like that. And Danny Stutzman, he had a great day overall, but that play was really the highlight.
It really comes to, I think it was pretty clear in the second half, even as, again, we've talked, there was encouraging things for Jackson Arnold, but there just seemed to be those, the defense was going to need to make plays for Oklahoma to win this game. And I think that it became discouraging as BYU went on a run where they were just tearing the Oklahoma defense up. But I think it became pretty clear that OU's not going to win this game unless this defense forces a turnover that leads to a touchdown. And that even includes after the Billy Bowman pick six, because BYU went right back down the field and scored. And I honestly thought that was going to be the knockout punch initially, that Billy Bowman interception, and BYU responded. So it was pretty clear to me in that fourth quarter, okay, the defense is going to have to make a couple of plays. And I think it was not only huge. Again, we've seen what this defense is like with and without Danny Stutzman. He was huge again today, led the team with 10 tackles, led the team with 2 tackles for loss, obviously had the only sack. But again, this always comes down to what was the thing in the 2 losses for Oklahoma? It was they lost the turnover battle. What'd they do today? In a close game that probably could have gone either way, they won the turnover battle 3-0 and scored 21 points off those turnovers. Oklahoma probably doesn't win today if they don't get that Danny Stutzman play and they don't get that Billy Bowman interception. That's just the truth.
Yeah, no, overall, I just thought that the defense, Danny Stutzman in particular, he made plays. You could tell, like, early on, you could tell he was weak because they kept pulling him out for Kobe McKenzie, Jaron Kanik. Like, you could tell, like, he was struggling a little bit. Venables said, look, we gave him IVs. He went in halftime, got more IVs. And there was he played different, right? Like, he played with a little bit of a spark, a little bit more of an edge in the second half. And I think ultimately, without him, they lose the ball game. Mm-hmm. Like you said, they lose the ball game without Danny Stutzman. This defense without Danny Stutzman is, again, just like Gentry Williams. And that's kind of been the MO this season. No Gentry, no good. No Danny, no good. And so you got to have those two, or at least one of those two, for to have a serviceable defense. When both of those guys are in, this defense is probably up there with Texas as maybe the top 2 defenses in the Big 12 and one of the top, 30 defenses in the country. And that's not something you could say about Oklahoma for a long time. So it's getting better. Leaders like Danny Stutzman make it better. The fact that he fought through everything, just like Venable said, these players want to play, and he wants to play. And that's something about this team. They want to play. They want to get better. They're very close knit. And as that culture continues to service itself and build and build and build year in and year out, I think you're going to end up with a really good defense down the line. Fans are just going to have to put up with days like this for a while until they put everything together and get the roster the way they want it and get more Danny Stutzman-esque type players on the roster, particularly at linebacker.
I think the thing that kind of stuck out to me today, at least, was, I know. So the left tackle for BYU is, he's a first round talent. I can't even pretend to say his last name, but Kingsley
Suamataia.
Yes, he's incredible. The thing is, Oklahoma, when it has struggled on the road, it has been for lack of a pass rush, because quarterbacks have had an opportunity to. Now, there were a couple of times, I remember one in particular, Danny Stutzman, right up the middle, unblocked through the A gap, and Retzloff had to just throw it at a running back's feet. Those things just weren't happening consistently enough. But Danny being able to make that play, obviously getting around the edge and getting pressure and creating that play there, which Gavin turned into 6 points, just a few plays later.
Yep.
It's again, it goes back to that complementary football. So even when the pass rush is struggling, Danny stepped in and made a big play, and I don't think that can be understated.
All right, fellas, final words. Who gets your gold star for the day? And I'm not necessarily talking MVP here, but who's one player that you want to highlight for his performance today and his contributions to an Oklahoma victory? Jesse?
I really think it's Gavin Sawchuk, and I know we've talked a lot about him. And I might be slightly biased because I just wrote a feature about him over at ouinsider.com. But I think it's his performances lately have completely overshadowed again how much this running game struggled for consistency. And I think his runs, particularly in the second half with Jackson Arnold in, Jackson even said it after the game that there were a couple of runs from Gavin in particular that helped him settle in, that helped Jackson settle in. And I think his ability to generate consistent offense, of course, that touchdown that I don't know how he scored on that. He broke like 1 million tackles. Did everybody on the BYU defense try to tackle him? And he just said, no,
not today.
I'm not going to get tackled. To run up for over 7 yards per carry, for him to clearly assert himself as the starting running back for this team, for him to be so young, for that to be so encouraging for the rest of the season and moving forward. And what he did today, I think it's Gavin Sawchuk.
I'm going to go. So this was a low offensive output game. There was only 24 offensive points scored. Jaden Gibson had 2 catches for 82 yards and touchdown. And he only had 2 targets on the day. So this is a guy that just continues to work himself into opportunities, work himself into being able to make a difference. And whenever he gets opportunities, he flashes. And so, his touchdown grab today was huge. Had another big long reception. And so I think that's got to be my guy. When you're averaging 41 yards of reception, I know that it's only 2 up on the day, but still very, very good day for him, and hope to see more out of him soon.
I'll just do it. Jackson Arnold. He came in.
Yeah.
He did what he had to do, protected the ball. Not a really great stat line. I think he had 33 yards passing, something like that. It wasn't great, but he made big plays when he had to make big plays. He got 2 crucial first downs, one with his legs, one with the throw where he checked out of the play. He audibled. So, and I think, again, last year, this game, Dylan goes down. No offense, Davis, but yikes. If Bevel would have came in, yikes. OU wins that game, not only because of the fact that Danny Stutzman played, but the fact that your backup is now Jackson Arnold. That is why you win the ball game. And I think that is a fact. That is a fact.
Now, all 3 of you guys went with offensive players. So I'm going to flip the script, and I'm going to go defensive side of the ball with my gold star. And it goes to Billy Bowman because as we sit here, we don't know who's going to be playing for the Big 12 championship a couple of weeks from now in Arlington. We're getting ready to sit down and watch this Texas-Iowa State game tonight. That will go a long way towards dictating the outcome, dictating who it is that matches up in Arlington for the Big 12 crown in this very odd 14-team year in the conference. But especially if Oklahoma is one of those teams that goes to Arlington, I think you can look back on that 100-yard pick six as the play that saved OU's season. Because that may be the difference, guys, between going to a New Year's Six Bowl and going to the Alamo Bowl.
Correct.
Or a worse bowl game than that.
If BYU takes the lead right there with all the momentum they had.
And it wasn't just 7 points. It was a 14-point swing. I mean, that was huge.
Because again, BYU came right back down after that pick and scored again. So it's not like, I mean,
Well, and I'll tell you, I'm standing there down in the end zone with my camera. I didn't get a single shot of Billy Bowman's touchdown return because at that point I was transferring photos to you guys. I figured like the way that drive was going, I was like, okay, they're just going to call another run play and waltz right into the end zone. So nothing more to see here. So I had my camera down. I had my SD card plugged into my phone. It's like, okay, well, BYU is going to score. It is what it is. Might as well get this out of the way. And then I look up and the stadium has just kind of collectively let out a gasp of shock and horror. And Billy Bowman is streaking down the sideline. Yeah, he gets to about the 25-yard line, and you could tell he just he ran out of gas. Exactly, it was very similar to a car running out of gas. He just hit it. It just hit a spot where everything just went into neutral, but had just enough to get to the end zone and give the Sooners that 24-17 lead. Defense held BYU scoreless in the fourth quarter, which was big. Good on them, but without that play by Billy Bowman, I do not believe at all that Oklahoma wins that game today. I think that was the play more so than any other that changed this football game.
Agreed.
That is a wrap for this installment of the OU Insider Under the Visor postgame podcast. Everything this coming week is somewhat accelerated. Brent Venables will have his weekly press conference on Monday. Thanksgiving is Thursday, so I would imagine midweek content may be a little bit more sparse as we sit down to eat some turkey with our families and celebrate the beginning of the holiday season. I regard Thanksgiving as the beginning of holiday season. Anybody who puts Christmas decorations up before Thanksgiving, I look upon them in disgust.
Well, then you hate it because we have at the drum house, the Christmas tree is up and the Christmas lights are up because you got to put them up before you go freeze your ass off outside.
My respect for you just diminished slightly in real time.
It's all right.
I'll give you a pass. So the Sooners face off with TCU Black Friday, 11 a.m. kickoff. Shocker. Back in Norman. We will have you covered. We'll have to figure out what we're going to do for the Under the Visor pregame podcast because don't really want to be doing that pod from the Thanksgiving dinner table. But rest assured, we will have you guys covered all week next week. A reminder that this podcast and all of our podcasts are brought to you by our friends at Olipop, the soda that's good for you. Check them out at drinkolipop.com and use promo code CHAMPU20 to get 20% off. And head to ouinsider.com. Jump on board if you're not already a member. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if that's how you get this podcast. Subscribe via whatever streaming platform you listen on if you just do the audio-only version. Whatever the case, we appreciate you consuming our content here at ouinsider.com. For Jesse, for Brian, for Brandon, I'm Parker. Take it easy, everybody. We'll talk next week.